Welcome back to another Tech Talk with Aaron. I'm Aaron Schatz. Been a while, like a few years, I think. I actually wanted to complain a little bit and then start a new series off. And I think I want to complain about this guy right here. So what I have here is one of my Lenovo smart displays from the Google Home or Google Assistant family of products. What's interesting about this Lenovo display is that, again, it's Google Home or Google Assistant or whatever smart home thing that they're calling these days. So it's tied into the Google ecosystem, which I am heavily involved in. I have, my Google account is there. I have an old G Suite account that is now grandfathered in for free, which Google, you really, really suck, by the way, because you're making it really difficult to keep that free account. I get it that we're not paying for it, but come on. We bought into your ecosystem really in the early days. You can give us some early adopters some love, and you just don't, and it's really frustrating. We don't need a Gmail address to do everything. That's our personal accounts. We should be able to use them for things like this, like family accounts, which we can't do right now. Very frustrating, and I don't feel like moving to a regular Gmail account. As an early adopter of Google products, I was hesitant to actually buy the Google Home because I was really afraid that it was going to be in my home, listening all the time, and yada, yada. I am sure that that's the case. I am not confident that Google has any controls that actually mean anything for privacy. They make their money through advertising, of which I am part of that industry, and I know all about it. So that's that. The second thing is I am a product manager. That's what I do for my career, and it's how I make money. I'm going to tell you something. Google's products are so arduous to use. They are so unintuitive, and it's frustrating. Take this thing for an example, right? Google, I think a few months ago, said, we're going to kill support for this thing. We're only going to have our own branded products, our Nest products, actually be the ones that support it. So now the functionality is becoming less and less, and I have no idea what things work and what things don't, and that's extremely frustrating. Ask anybody, and I hope that they would agree with this. The most frustrating thing is not when things just don't work, right? If I say something, and this is I don't know what to do or whatever, I get that. Fine. It's when something sort of works. Once in a while it works, once in a while it doesn't work. I can't tell you how frustrating that is for someone that is technology-oriented like myself to try to debug and have no clue about how or what is going on. Is it the router? Is it Google? Is it some other third party? It's so frustrating. So that leads me to what this series is about. This is about my smart home, or I should say my sort of smart home. You might ask, why am I saying my sort of smart home? So I have a house that's built in the 90s. Nothing smart about it, right? Light switches turn off and on, the actual lights. I have outlets. Everything is good to go. And all of a sudden, I got one of these guys, right? Actually, it was the speaker initially. And then all of a sudden, smart lights started coming on, like the Philips Hue or the smart switches or smart outlets. And I was like, oh, wow, this is great. I can start wiring my house and do things that are more automation, right? Turn things off and on at certain schedules and stuff like that. That wasn't the case. The very first thing that I figured out is I don't like the hot word on these devices. So I have the microphone disabled. And if I said, hey, Google, or okay, Google, this thing would answer. And that's fine. Except when I have multiple things in my house that answer at the same time. So I have this device in my kitchen. By the way, one of the best things of these devices, especially with a screen, are kitchen timers. For instance, you could say, hey Google, set a rice timer for whatever amount of minutes, or hey Google, set a meat timer for X amount of minutes, and it will show both. Absolutely fantastic. Not going to knock it on this one because that is a fantastic feature. I use it all the time. In fact, if there was only one thing that I wanted it for, it would be those kitchen timers. And you might say, that's pretty stupid. It's an expensive device for just kitchen timers. You're right. But the fact that I don't have to set it manually and all this stuff, and it actually just works, absolutely fantastic. Except when you don't have internet or any number of weird things happen. But by and large, if you have stable internet, stable Wi-Fi, this thing is absolutely fantastic for kitchen timers. And I think I bought this thing for $30 or $40 on sale. So I've gotten so much use out of it in addition to all the other Googly stuff. For instance, This integrates with Sling. This integrates with YouTube TV. Frustrating things there too, so don't get me started on there. We're going to do something a little bit later probably. This is about the smart home stuff. So I absolutely think these devices are capable of great things. I just don't think they're ready. I'm going pretty deep into why I don't like the Google Home just like overall thing, and that's probably a separate thing. I want to talk more about the smart home aspects of this now. So I was bought into Google Home pretty early on. As soon as they started getting like smart switches and smart plugs and then smart lights, I was in. I was like, oh wow, there's going to be so much I can do with this. I'm going to be able to change all my switches. I'm going to change some outlets. It's going to be great. I'm going to do all kinds of home automation. I heard of all kinds of things about home automation back in the day, right? There's like Zigbee, Z-Wave, all these things. And I'm like, this is going to be great because it's going to be simple to use. It's just going to work. I don't need a hub because they're all Wi-Fi. It's going to be absolutely great. That's not the case. First thing I've realized, Wi-Fi is not the best thing to use when you're doing smart home stuff. And you might be saying, oh, my Wi-Fi is great. I don't care if your Wi-Fi is great or not. Invariably, you're going to have some problems. You're going to have hiccups, right? There's a lot of things talking 2.4 or 5 gigahertz. And I can tell you that once in a while, something just doesn't work. And it's so frustrating to figure out what it is, right? So not only that, Google doesn't make their own hardware for like light switches or bulbs or outlets. It's always something else like D-Link, TP-Link, Wemo, you name it. There's a bunch of different brands that do all the same things, right? You can replace an outlet, you can replace a light switch, and Wi-Fi, boom, should be good to go, right? Not the case. Each of those products have their own ecosystem. So you have to use their application to set it up. You have to use their application to name the devices and all this stuff. Then you can link them to this device. Where, I get it, there's this new standard called Matter coming out that's supposed to make all of this seamless and all this easy to go. It hasn't happened yet, right? Matter was released, last year or something? I don't even see many manufacturers supporting that right now. So maybe in a couple of years, this will be a moot point. But right now, it's really frustrating to be like, I'm going to go into the Google Home ecosystem. I'm going to buy a product from, let's just say, TP-Link or D-Link or Wemo, and I'm going to set it up. I have to set up in their application. Then I have to connect that application to this device. And then, maybe something got out of sync, and I have to keep resyncing the devices. Very, very frustrating. I shouldn't have to do that. And the reason you have to keep doing that is because there's two separate services talking to each other over the internet. It's not communicating through this. This is where the Amazon Echo actually comes into play. So if you compare this device to the Echo, forgetting the actual, that one is Amazon, one is Google, I get that. Again, I'm very, very big into Google, so that's why I have one of these things. But the Echo, a lot of them actually have a Zigbee hub in there. We're going to get into what that means in a second, but let's just say that this device requires the internet. Absolutely requires the internet. If there's no internet, this thing doesn't work at all. This thing does not talk to any of the devices in my house directly at all. It actually has to go out to the internet and come back. That's really frustrating. So if the internet's down, none of the smart things in my house work. Period, end of story. I mentioned that the Amazon Echo, some of the devices, have a Zigbee hub built into there. Zigbee is a network just like Wi-Fi is, except it's low power and pretty low bandwidth. And that's perfectly fine for switches and outlets and things that just deal with home automation. And the Amazon Echoes that do have Zigbee built in can talk directly to the switch on your network. That's the hub for Zigbee. I don't know exactly the nuances about, does it require internet access to set it up or all that stuff because I don't use a device. But I do know that there's a Zigbee hub in there, and this thing has no local access at all. Period, end of story. So, +1 for an Echo device, except I know that's got a whole range of problems too. But I'm like, I don't know anything about that. I don't want to complain about that. I'm going to complain more about this. We've arrived at my real major problem here. I have great internet access, I think. I have Fios. Works really well. I thought, pretty good Wi-Fi. No rhyme or reason why my devices just don't show up anymore, right? They said hey Google, turn on the kitchen counter lights. Oh, I don't know. They're not there anymore. Something went wrong. Or, I can't connect to D-Link. Or, I can't connect to TP-Link. It's like, why? I go into the application. I'm like, okay, let me go see what's going on here. Let me just go into my home application, And we will see what's going on here. Okay, there's, oh, look, look at that, look at that. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this, and I'll show you that, I'll put it on one of these sides. And you can see that my kitchen sink light is offline. How frustrating is that? And it was just working. Now it shows it's offline, right? Offline. So that's great. Now, here's the weird thing, right? So if I hold, there's this thing called 3 lights, right? So if I actually I'm going to show you this. I got another screenshot here. I should have just recorded the video, but I didn't. So there you go. Now, if I actually tap the actual toggle, it'll actually turn on. So it's actually connected. I don't understand why that's actually happening, but I know that when I go back, it doesn't work. And why is that? I don't know. I can't debug that. And imagine someone that has no technological experience when this happens. They are so frustrated. This should not happen in a smartphone. This is terrible. I know I'm making a big deal about this where things get really frustrating, but think about it this way. You know what, forget think about it. I'm going to tell you an actual situation that happened to me. So, my parents have a house down the Jersey Shore, and I was like, okay, they have all these smart switches, so I figured, all right, they got a Google Home, put it in their kitchen, they got a Nest thermostat, because it would be great with the Nest thermostat to be able to be like, okay, I'm going down the shore, going to lower the temperature so it's actually cool, make sure that I didn't forget to actually turn it back up when I leave. It does all that on its own. That works fine if it has internet access. I installed a bunch of smart switches in their house too. I can't tell you the frustrating dilemma I've had with those smart switches. And I'm going to rip them all out. The frustrating dilemma I've had, they were, by the way, TP-Link. They were all TP-Link. And I have TP-Link in my house. And they work pretty well, except for the one-off time that they don't, which actually happens often, more often than I want them to happen. But in my parents' house, they just work or don't work randomly. All of a sudden, I'll be like, okay, they work, right? Click it, it works. Then all of a sudden, they go offline. It just goes right offline, and then they don't show up. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I can't figure out why. And that's the problem, right? It's not that there are problems, it's that you can't figure out why there's a problem. You can't fix the problem. That's the big problem with these kind of ecosystems, right? They're very, very big black boxes, right? There's some black box right here. There's some black box on the internet, and I don't want that anymore. I want to be in control of my own destiny. That's what we're about to talk right now. So now we're into the meat and potatoes of this. You might be saying, hey, Aaron, all right, I get it. You want to be in charge of your own destiny, but I'm also lazy. I want a voice assistant. I get you. I'm the same way. I'm not saying we throw this away. Far from it. I'm just saying we shouldn't have to rely on this to do everything, right? This ecosystem, the Google Home ecosystem, only got routines that could be triggered from another device in 2022. What are you talking about? As soon as this became a smart home thing, I should have been able to click a switch and it does something else. That didn't arrive till 2022. Last year. That's insanity. Smart homes have been around for years and years and years. Home automation is one of the primary functions that you would want to do in a smart home. And this didn't get that till last year. That's how much it shows that Google cares about the smart home. Now you're going to ask me, okay, great. So we're not going to use this. What are we going to use? I mean, what am I going to have to? I'm going to be this technician, right? I'm going to say, okay, hold on a second. So I get it that there's going to be some setup. And I get it that there's this Matter thing coming along that may make all this a non-issue anymore. However, there's still the concept of being in control of your own destiny. Let's just say the internet went out, right? And you say, hey, turn on the lights. Nothing happens, right? Let's just say that you have counter lights that you don't have a switch for. Like me. They just don't work without this. That's really frustrating. Now, I know I can set up a routine now to actually say, oh, when I click this switch, turn on the kitchen counter lights and turn on the overhead lights and all that stuff. That didn't come out till last year. So for years, I didn't even have that capability. Really frustrating. So I know that TP-Link in its own application did have that sort of functionality, but the actual outlet that I was using was not TP-Link, so I didn't have that cross functionality that something like this should have given me. All of this is really leading on to me saying, yeah, it's time for me to be in control of my own destiny. That means a little bit of technological exploration into the unknown, right? And this is where the series is going. You and I are going to be doing this together, right? And what do I mean by that? I'm going to take my reliance off of this thing, and we're going to figure out how to get reliance on our own. My target is Zigbee. You may ask, what is Zigbee? In short, it's just another wireless standard that allows devices to communicate with each other. It is low power, low bandwidth. Low power means that like you can have a button switch and you don't need to worry about power. It does not need Wi-Fi, right? So that's the other thing. So does that, you're like, okay, so how is that going to connect to anything? Well, you need a Zigbee hub, right? You need a point that things are going to talk to, and you need that thing to actually control the automation. And you're like, okay, that's basically another thing like this. Why would I need that, right? Because this thing is something you own. This thing is something you control. This thing is something that you can actually do all the home automation stuff that you want. There are open source solutions for this, but I'm not sure if that's the way I want to go this time. However, this is the start of this series, and I'm just doing a whole bunch of research right now. So I'll give you the open source solution, right? It is something called Home Assistant. You can install it on one of your computers, play with it, install it on a VM, all that kind of stuff. You're going to need some type of like plug-in device, like a USB dongle that offers Zigbee access. I mean, you could even use Z-Wave or whatever like that, a Thread if it's even like, if you find devices that even have Thread. I'm not sure I want to go that route. I want to buy something that just works, that's supported. They don't have to go hunt around for guides and everything. I do that enough on my computer already, right? For my home automation, I just want the thing to work. So I'm going to probably get a device. I'm going to buy something that's actually supported, that can actually integrate into this too, but that's not controlled by this. That's the difference, right? I'm going to have voice control, but it's not reliant on this. So let's just say this thing goes down for any reason. My switches, I'm going to click a switch, and I'm going to tell it to turn on 2 lights, and it will just do that, no problem. That's the goal anyway. What I'm looking at is the Habitat. I haven't bought it yet, but this is a series. As a series, that means you should subscribe and keep current, because we are going on a trip. We are going on a trip together. We are in this together. We're going to drive off the cliff. No, we're not driving off the cliff. We're going to fly all the way into the sunset. It's going to be great. And how are we going to do that? Together. I plan on actually doing like really educational things. Because one of the frustrating things that I find when I'm doing a lot of research on these things, like for Zigbee, like light switches and stuff, is like, I have no idea what device replaces a device in my dumb house. Like for instance, a light switch. There's Zigbee light switches that do like different things. I have no idea which one is supposed to do what. They all say like, oh, this is a 2-way. It's like, I have a single pole switch. That's the kind of thing that I'm going to dispel those kind of problems that I've had when I was researching. So I think I'm going to create some type of electrical board. I'm going to put boxes in there. I'm going to put outlets. I'm going to put switches in there. And I'm going to show you exactly what devices do what and what they replace. This is all not for your benefit. This is also for my benefit, because I need to do this for myself. Because half the time I'm looking at this online and I'm like, I have no idea if this is going to work for what I need it to do. So I'm going to make a little test bed to actually do that. It just so happens that I want you along for the ride. And I think that's going to be great. This is the point where I ask you for help too, because I know a lot of you already have smart homes that probably use Zigbee or Z-Wave. Now, Zigbee and Z-Wave are very, very similar. Zigbee is actually like open. You can just implement it. Z-Wave is more proprietary. It's licensed and stuff like that. So still, like a Habitat, Home Assistant, they can use Zigbee or Z-Wave. It doesn't matter. So most of the things are like more or less interchangeable. Certain devices are only Z-Wave. Certain devices are only Zigbee. So that's the only caveat there. But if you have a smart home and then you do like Home Assistant or Habitat or something else, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear how you set things up, especially things like single pole switches, 2-way switches, dimmers, outlets, automation, all that stuff. So please, love the feedback. Please leave some comments. I would love to hear from you. And if you got any things that you want me to look out, I would love that too. So please post a comment. I'll check it out. Maybe it'll actually find its way in the series. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.